Hello lovely people, it's Nicolette back in the Stitches and Slapdashery sewing room, and it's denim week here. I had no plans for it to be a denim week, but my son inspired me by giving me some storage cubes that he'd finished with in his bedroom. So I moved them down into the closet area in my sewing room. So that resulted in a clear up of my upcycled or yet to be upcycled jeans and denim stash, and batting and interfacing. So now it looks a lot tidier. Plus I also know what I have in there now. I have two fairly sizable boxes of jeans legs and pieces, and I have another smaller box of small chunks, and that's not including a whole bunch of Ziploc bags on the other side of the room which carry pockets and zippers and other stuff like that that I've cut off of jeans and I'm hanging on to for now. So because I was thinking about using the denim, I went on a little bit of a denim splurge. So later I will show you the two denim bags that I've already made, plus the one that's in progress. And also I made another cotton tote out of a quilt panel that's been sitting around in my stash for far too long. So that felt good to get that used up. And that one's going to be for me because it's Hello Kitty. So what have I been doing this week? Well, I've been reading a really good book. I have been reading The Gilded Hour by Sarah Donati. The Gilded Hour. If I fluff that. It's huge. It's a huge, thick book. And I am most of the way through it now. Let me put my bookmark in properly and we can see how far I've got. I'm probably more than 3/4 of the way through. It's a great story. It's well written and I'm really enjoying it. And this morning, Mr. Stitches and I were both awake at about 5:30, and normally I would just roll over and go back to sleep. But I thought, no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to make myself a cup of tea and I'm going to take it back to bed and read my library book. So that's what I did until about 8 o'clock. And yeah, always feels like such a luxury to do that, doesn't it? Because often you don't allow yourself the time to just sit and read for that much time in a big chunk. So I've had to really make an effort to pull myself away from this book this morning because I really, really, really wanted to get some recording done, show you what I've been making. So I don't know how it ends yet. I'm excited to see how it ends. I was really grateful to have this book this week. I had a little bit of a worry about my health this week, and it's probably nothing. But my heart rate's been raised. It's been feeling like it's been raised for about 4 or 5 days now. And it felt like it was a little bit uneven. And sometimes when I go to bed at night, I'll get a little bit of a palpitation feeling, but not enough to worry my doctor with. But when it happened this week and it just didn't stop, I was like, oh, great, what's going on? So I ended up going to the emergency room on Thursday morning, just to be sure, just to get checked out. They said my heart rhythm's fine. They said my blood work was perfect. My BP was perfect. They're ordering me a Holter monitor, which is like a heart rate monitor, to wear. I think you wear it for 24 hours just to make sure there's no skipping of beats or any other irregularity. So yeah, I'm just feeling a little less energetic than usual. So I don't know, maybe I'm just fighting something. I feel fine otherwise. I don't feel like I've got a virus or a bug or a cold or anything like that. So I don't know. Yeah, as I say, it's probably nothing. And it'll probably pass all of its own accord. So I'm trying not to worry about it. But yeah, it's hard to go to sleep when your heart's pounding. Anyway, that was that. I finished another project that I started a while back. You might remember if you were here. I made this mandala from a 12-inch square board that my friend Annette provided. She provided me with most of the materials for this, which is awesome. It was a 12-inch square board, 2 embroidery hoops, a bunch of Scrabble letters and wooden pieces, and the acrylic paints were mine. So I made this mandala a while ago, and it's now completely finished because I put a frame on it, or should I say Mr. Stitches put a frame on it. It's crazy. If you haven't seen this before, yes, those are funny little plastic toys around the center and some sort of construction kit plastic piece in the middle. Very strange, but you know, very fun. There's some wooden beads in there, there's some wooden heart shapes, some flower shapes, some squirrels, and it says, "See beauty in everything." And so when we were at the hardware store a couple of weeks back, I bought this piece of wood which Mr. Stitches cut and mitered the corners on and glued to the edges. The back is really messy, but that's okay because you're not going to see the back. I just put 1 layer of black acrylic on it. It's probably not the neatest job, but I think it does frame it nicely. I don't have a way of hanging it up, so at the moment it's living on my windowsill in my sewing room, just propped up against the window. But yeah, so much fun, and that was very, very meditative to make with all the placement of the pieces. Absolutely loved it. My friends made quite a few of those now. A couple of them are huge. They're probably at least 4 times the size. So they look amazing. She has such an eye for colour and a unique way of putting things together that just work. Yeah, incredible. The other thing I did a little bit on was my slow stitching project. So I think it was probably last vlog I showed you the spool that I had decoupaged. Oh, great. I have a tangle going on here. Wait a minute. Oh, good grief. So I had got this spool from work that used to have balloon ribbon on it. I said, don't throw those away. I can use them. And I used Mod Podge and torn up magazine pages. And it was from a quilting magazine. So most of the patterns on the quilt pages I chose had 9 patches on. I love 9 patches. I don't know if it's, I don't know what it is, but I like granny squares and I like 9 patches. And there's something about them that's so simple and appealing. Yeah. So I had decoupaged this spool in here, which is black plastic, but is now covered in magazine bits. And I cut a really long piece of cotton batting to go around it. And I think I showed you last time that I had put a little bit of fabric on. So the plan was was to just do a bit at a time. So rather than pin or baste down a whole length of fabric scraps, I decided to just do a section at a time. So this is the section I'm working on. I just loved that fabric with the girl in the swim ring. Just so fun. And I'm using this, what do they call it? Aunt Lydia's crochet thread, Classic 10. And it's Mexicana variegated. Got it from Michael's because I happen to work there, and it appealed to me because it's all rainbow colors. So why wouldn't it appeal to me, right? And it's a little thicker than what I'm used to embroidering with, but it's working. So let's see if I can get you a little closer to the stitching. I don't know if you can see that. I just did a bunch of running stitches, and I did a little bit of like stars over the dots on the swim ring, and a little bit of whatever this is called, and a herringbone stitch right here. So not a lot done yet, but it's living upstairs on my coffee table, and when I need something relaxing and meditative to do, I can pick it up and do a little bit on it. So that's going to be a pretty long-term project, because I don't remember how long the strip of batting was, but it was the whole width of the roll of batting, and yeah, I don't know what that was, but yeah, long-term project living in that little basket that I made a long time ago. This is a pattern from Michelle Patterns, I think it's called. I can't remember what she calls it, basket bag or something. I first saw it when I was watching Rachel at So Ray Me. She makes these to sell in different sizes and different fabrics. She makes some beautiful corduroy ones. And so I had left a comment on one of her vlogs and I said, I love that bag. You know, is it your own design? And she said, no, it's Michelle Patterns. So yeah, I should probably find a link for you to go under the video on that one. So I think that's most of what I have to tell you so far. And I think I'm going to sneeze. It's pollen season. Yes, it's pollen season. I don't have hay fever per se, but I do occasionally get a little bit sneezy from all the stuff that's flying around in the air. We've had some really hot days this week, like up to 30 degrees Celsius, and yeah, that's too hot for me. I like it cooler. I really think that, you know, if I could live in a place, no, I wouldn't really like it. But I was going to say if I could live in a place which, you know, is like between 10 degrees and 25, that would be great. But no, I actually like the cold. I just rather have extreme cold than extreme heat any day. Okay, so I have a bag partly cut out and ready to sew. So going to change you to a different view. We're going to get this bag made, and then I'm going to show you the other ones I made earlier in the week. I've rearranged the ring lights a little bit. I wanted to get a different sort of angle so that you could actually see me sewing. Unfortunately, you can't see my ironing surface, but we'll figure it out as we go. I put my ironing pad right on the table next to me, and I've got my little Ritz iron ready, and it makes sense to have it on my right side because that's where my socket is to plug it in. So I think I'm just about ready. I've put a jeans needle back in my machine, so that's good. I'm just using black thread again because using the same thread for everything is so much more efficient than trying to match things all the time. When I got this ready the other night and decided that I was going to show you the process, I got as far as cutting out the two bottom parts of the bag and the two top parts. So with this one, normally when I make tote bags for Dress for Success, which is a local women's organization, I usually just cut a 20-inch square and then 3-inch boxed bottoms. So it's really simple. It's just 20 inches by 20 inches. Cut a little 3-inch square out of the bottom corners, and handles are 24 inches long. If it's webbing, you just cut 24 inches. If it's a folded handle made of fabric, it's 24 by 4 inches. Simple as that. If it's unlined, if it's vinyl, I don't have to do anything with the seam allowances. If it's a fabric, I can do French seams. Or in the case of something with quilt cotton, I will do something that's lined, and that's what I'm going to do today. I haven't been able to cut my lining yet because I still need to piece these front pieces so that I can then measure them and figure out what I need to cut the lining. I think this denim is a little bit smaller than what I normally cut because I was working with a remnant. This is not actually from jeans, it's denim yardage I got as a remnant from Fabricland years ago, and I should probably double check that there's no holes in it or any damage on it because I think I got it for cheap on the basis that it wasn't perfect. No, it looks fine. And it's not too heavy, which is nice. So I think this is about 9.5 inches, maybe 10. Not sure. And the top part is another piece of fabric which is not quite a quilt cotton, it's a little heavier than that, and it's this purple flowery fabric. I think I was given it, I'm pretty sure I didn't buy it, and that's pretty much as wide as it came to me. So I've worked with what I had again. I cut as deep as I could get it based on the fabric I had, and then by the same width as the denim. So because this isn't a super thin fabric, I'm not interfacing it because the purple fabric is quite thick and the denim is quite thin, so I think they'll work okay, and I'm lining it anyway. So then I had a little bit left. I had this piece left, and I decided to make it into a front pocket. And then I had one even tinier piece left, which I'm going to make a key keeper with. So I usually cut key keeper 3 inches wide by 10 inches long. And then I fold the ends in and in half, a bit like a binding. Or if you're making a strap for a bag, you'll know how that works. And then I double it over. I sew down both sides. And then I incorporate a swivel hook in here. Now, the thing with swivel hooks is, okay, I've lost my D-ring. There it is. Normally with a swivel hook, I would want the bar of the metal to be as close to the same measurement as this as possible. The only swivel hooks I have left are a 1 inch on the inside of that D part, and it'll just flap about like crazy. So rather than use a swivel ring, I am just going to use a D ring because I have one that fits this perfectly. I think it's just a 1/2 inch one. So instead of the person who gets this bag having a clip to put their keys on, I'm going to assume they've already got a clip on their keys and they'll just have to clip it to the D-ring if they want to use that part of the bag. I'm just working with what I have here, trying not to make it necessary to buy a bunch more stuff because, yeah, I'm on a mission, to de-stash or use up the stash as much as possible. So with the pocket, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I thought about putting it on the inside, but then it won't go with the lining I've chosen to use. And then I thought about, once I had sewn these two parts together, like the flowery and the denim, I thought once I had sewn those two together, I could apply a pocket to the front. And then I had a better idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct the pocket how I normally do. So I'm going to make the pocket, turn it right side out and apply it to the bag, but I'm going to apply it only to the top part. So what I'll do, rather than come all the way around here and sew, I'm just going to sew the two sides, flip it around, press it nice and flat, and then I am going to attach it to the bottom part of this piece of fabric. And what I'm hoping is that I can incorporate all the raw edges into the seam when I do the denim on the bottom, and that the pocket will just look neat on the flowery part of the bag, and then the bottom of it will hide or will disappear into the seam with the denim. So this is a bit of an experiment because I've not done that before. So yeah, I'm going to do that. I haven't got my iron plugged in yet. I don't think I'm going to need it quite yet. Well, no, maybe I lie, because I will need to iron this once I've flipped it the right side out. So let's get it ready to use. I use a power bar that goes from the wall over there to here. It has 3 sockets on it, and for a long time it was just lying on the floor. But what I've done now is I've duct taped it to the table. So it's always there, right there at table height, and I can just plug things in really easily now instead of fishing for the thing on the floor, and I love it. So yes, iron is on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make my stitch length a bit longer because I don't like too short of a stitch length with the thicker fabrics. I don't know what this measures. I should probably tell you what it measures, shouldn't I? Oh yeah, I'm very excited. I'm actually using one of these pots that I made a while back for things I need to grab easily on my desk. This, because I only had a little bit left of it, was 2 3/4 by 10. That's the key holder. And then this is about 14 inches by 8 inches. 14 by 8. Apologies if you're centimeters, but I'm working in inches here. I'm bilingual when it comes to measurements, but yeah, I often default to inches anyway. All right, so I'm going to get this bit sewn and show you what comes next. So now that I've so now that I have sewn down both sides of the pocket, I am going to trim the corners up by the fold and press that. Where is my pointy tool? Here it is. It's always good to have a pointy tool in your arsenal, isn't it? Even if it's just a chopstick or something like that. This fabric's got quite a bit of bounce to it. So what I'm going to do now is top stitch across that folded edge. So I want to go to probably 3.5 for that. The pocket is ready to apply. So that didn't take long. That's good. Now for the little key retainer, here we go. I've sewn down both sides of it. So the way I make these is the same whether I use a D-ring or a swivel hook. So once it's folded and sewn like that, you don't have to worry about raw ends, although it's nice to clip away those annoying little ends. Just thread this on here. One thing I didn't say about the size of the bag, because I'm making this two-tone, I would not cut my pieces 20 by 10 if I was making my standard bag. Obviously I would cut them like 20 by 10 and a half maybe to allow for the seam allowance down the middle. But as I said, this bag is not quite the standard size because I was working with a small piece of fabric. All right, so once the D-ring's on there, I sew this. Now I need to remember to go back to my 2.6. Haha, mustn't forget that, Nicola. How many times have I forgotten that? Yeah, too many to count. So I did a little bit of a little seam right here, about 3/8 of an inch away from the end. And then I flip it round this way so that the seam allowance is on the inside, and then slide my clip or D-ring up next to there. So in the past, I've done this a couple of different ways. I've snugged it up against the seam allowance and had it like that, but I'm not particularly keen on that way. So instead, what I often do is I pull the seam a little bit away from the end so that where the D-ring is, it's not adding to the bulk right on the end there. I'm sure there's a better way of doing this. In fact, I know there's a better way of doing this in where you can have all of those seam allowances hidden away, but I'm slapdash like that. So once I've got the seam allowances out of the way, then I just sew another seam here. I don't like to go through 50 million layers of fabric, so I just like to keep away from that bulk if I can. So there it is, ready to be threaded onto one of the handles when I sew it in. The main challenge is remembering to put it on the handle before I sew it in. Now, I thought I had myself some webbing ready, but I don't. But that's okay, I'll grab that later. So here comes the experimental part. I'm going to take one of my flower sections and I am going to find the center and then center this on here. You can barely see it, purple on purple. So I found the center of the piece and the pocket, laid them together, raw edges matching. There's 4 inches at the top here, which I think should be fine. Once that is turned over, let's see, once that is hemmed with the handles, it won't be too close to the top. It's something you have to keep in mind if you're adding a pocket like that. So I'm happy with that. And I'm just gonna sew down both sides, and I'll probably also baste across the bottom just to keep all of those layers together, because there's 3 layers there, and when I'm sewing the denim on, I don't want them to shift. So on each side I sewed from top to bottom because I didn't want to drag this side of the pocket up. So I just started up here down to the edge, and then I lengthened my stitch length and did a row of stitching along the bottom there. And that way it's all going to stay put when I sew the denim to that section, she said optimistically. Things sometimes happen that shouldn't happen. Let's have faith that they won't. So now all I have to do is take my floral sections and sew my denim sections on there, join it up along there. So normally when I iron a seam like this, I would normally let the seam allowance go up away from the denim, because usually that would be the bulkier side, but I think this one might be going the other way. I'm going to press it the other way because I think the denim's thinner than the 3 layers of purple floral. And actually that will work well when it comes to doing the sides of the bag, because seam allowances can nest better that way. So that's the front of the bag. I think that'll work really well, having that pocket inset in there. And it's probably big enough to fit in a cell phone or a wallet or something. Yeah, I think that'll work. But for this side, I will iron the seam allowances the other way. I know I said it before, but I really love this little iron. I was using my bigger, chunkier iron the other day and just thinking how much more awkward it was to maneuver it. Okay, so that one is ready too. So now I'm going to take this over to my cutting mat and double check how tall this is so that I know exactly how big to cut my lining. And then I'll also cut out my 3-inch squares for the boxed bottoms. So by the time I had done my seaming, my pieces were 21 by 20, and I could trim it down to 20 by 20, but I'm not going to. The nice thing about having a square piece to start with is that you can't get confused about where to cut out your chunks for the boxy bottoms. Obviously, it's obvious with this because the denim's at the bottom, but with my lining pieces, I had to keep checking and make sure that I didn't cut the boxed bottoms out of the wrong corners. So I had to make sure I had the 21 inches that way and the 20 inches that way, because it's only an inch difference and it could be hard to tell. So I do need to just cut myself 2 pieces of webbing that are 24 inches long, so I'm going to have to run over to the cutting table again. So this is going to be the first time I use some of this cotton webbing from Amazon. I think it's a blend actually, a polycotton maybe. You know how sometimes the descriptions on these sites isn't exactly accurate. It's thinner than what I'm used to, but still perfectly strong, and it should be nice and easy to sew into my bag. I did unroll it when I first got it to let it relax, but it's still looking a teeny bit creased. All right, so I need to grab one lining and one outer, and I am going to find the center of this outer. Grab my little ruler. I think usually I probably measure out 3 inches either way to put the handles. But I think I'm going to make sure that it lines up fairly well with my pocket. There's another way you can do an outer pocket. You can take the webbing all the way down into this seam here and cover up the edge of the pocket. But I didn't think of that, did I? I only just thought of that possibility. But then that uses more webbing, and I like to be a little frugal sometimes. So I think I'm just going to measure up from here, put a pin in. So what I'm going to do is I am going to line up the left side of my webbing with the left side of the pocket, and then I'll line the right side of that webbing up with the right side of that pocket, just so that it looks better and more planned, even though it wasn't planned. So now that I have done that, I will do the same on the other side. So what I'm going to have to do is just hold the two pieces together so that I can make sure they're both the same on each side. And then I'm going to do a bit of basting across here, because I like it to not shift when I'm sewing the top part down. Now that my webbing has been basted on just with a little bit of stitching within the seam allowance, I can now put this down here, and I can put the lining on top, right sides together, and I'll just throw a couple of pins in. Don't think I'm going to need many. I think both of these fabrics are fairly stable. It was a bit of a battle earlier in the week when I was dealing with quite a bit of stretchy denim. That was fun. I did triple stitch over where the webbing goes into the seam there. I think I might be almost to the end of a bobbin. I'm hoping I don't run out at a crucial moment. I will check it for sure before I do any top stitching, just in case, because Murphy's Law says it will run out just as you're in the most visible part of a project. I now have 2 sections. Each one's got an outer and an inner, so we're going to put them together face to face. These bags are huge, but they are designed to hold a bunch of clothing. Dress for Success lets women choose from a virtual, not a virtual store, it's a free store. They have a whole room full of clothing set up as if it were a shop, but they're not paying for it. It's donated. It's a charity. And then they can get themselves ready for interviews. And so they need a pretty big bag to put all of their clothes in to take home. So it's nice to think that they might keep these bags and use them in the future as well. But if they don't, hopefully they'll get used by somebody. So I'm just being careful to match up my seam where the lining and the outer match, and my seams where the denim and the cotton match. My edges aren't exactly matching very well. I have pinned it fairly minimally, admittedly. So my preferred way of sewing this sort of thing is to start at the place where the outer and inner meet and do the outer sides and bottom, working away from that middle part. And then I go over to the lining and I do top to bottom on the lining sides and across the bottom, leaving a turning gap in here so that I can flip it around the right way afterwards. I just feel like that minimizes the danger of, what's the word I'm looking for? Slippage. So hopefully these parts here will match up as well as possible. Also, when I'm sewing the lining, once I get onto the lining, I increase my seam allowance a bit so that the lining nests inside the outer a little bit more neatly. I was right about the bobbin running out. I just had to refill it. It had maybe a foot of thread left on it. I've done all my seams, all my main seams, and I left that gap at the bottom here so that I can turn it out afterwards. So now I just need to box corners, and I have to say it's so much easier when you've pre-cut them. I find that quite often if you're trying to just squash the corner and get a nice neat straight line across, there's a lot of faffing involved. Whereas if you've already cut the squares out, you can't mistake where the edge of the fabric is, can you? The only thing is it's a good idea to backstitch right here so that things don't start coming apart as you're fiddling about with it. So yeah, there's not quite meeting up right here where there was a little bit of excess fabric coming out, and I could actually trim that just to make it a little bit more level, and that way I'm not wondering where the heck I'm supposed to be sewing. So I'm nesting my seams. My seams are matching perfectly right there. So I only need to put one pin in there really, just to make sure it holds while I sew across. Feel quite productive this week. I always like it. I like that feeling a lot. There are some things you do for the joy of it and just not worrying about whether there's a product at the end of it or how long it takes to get to that product. And then there's other times where you just want to get it done. It's still fun or enjoyable or satisfying, but in a different way. Ouch. What would a day be without stabbing myself with a pin? The day is not complete unless I have stabbed myself with a pin. My other two bags are very different from this. Even though I've been talking about the standard way of making tote bags, and last month, yeah, it was last month, I did make some very standard tote bags. But the other ones I'm going to show you later are very different. They are unique. It makes it more interesting. It's sufficient to make a batch of identical bags, but it's also not as fun as coming up with different ways of making bags and having them look different from each other. There we go, there's one, 3 more to go. Now this is one of my favorite parts of making a bag. Turning it right side out, seeing that it looks good and it's nearly done. So I know the lining doesn't exactly match the flowery fabric on the outside, but it did inspire it because I had a lot of this spirally fabric with the turquoise, pink and purple in. It was a double width quilt cotton and I got quite a lot of it for free again, because there was a whole line of them that came into the shop and somebody complained that the red colorway was running. When she took it home, pre-washed it, she was scared to use it in a quilt, understandably. And so I think the whole range got written off. So I ended up with quite a bit of this. And I obviously did wash it when I got it home. I don't think it ran. I don't think this purple colorway ran. But I was looking for something in the stash that was in the purple range that could go with this denim. And I just happened to have this one. And so I'm like, yeah, that works. That works fine. So normally, like previously, I would have just gone ahead and sewn up this gap first and then gone and tucked it in and top stitched. But I've been burned that way a few times because what I like to check before I have closed up my lining is I like to check that the side seam allowances are sitting nicely, playing nice with each other, so it's not too bulky to sew over. So I like to flatten it out and then pinch it like that and whack a pin in, because I don't want to be having my sewing machine hitching over the bulk. Sometimes it does anyway. Yeah, I mean, I love this machine, but sometimes I dream of a slightly more heavy duty one, shall we say, that doesn't sometimes do uneven stitches over bulky areas. And I know there's ways of avoiding that. I can't use a jumper with that walking foot, and I wouldn't even dream of making something like this without my walking foot on. But I have in the past made a little hump jumper by folding over some denim or fabric, other fabric, and putting it behind the foot as I've gone towards a particularly lumpy seam. And that did seem to work. It did seem to help with the uneven stitching. And other times I just kind of go for it and hope for the best. Because that's just me. Sometimes I'll iron it before I top stitch. And, you know, when people on YouTube channels with tutorials, they don't iron it before top stitching, I'm very critical of them. And sometimes I don't do it either. So because this fabric is pretty bouncy, I think I might just get my iron back on and make sure that is pressed before I sew it. Time to top stitch. I'm going to go to a 3.5 stitch length again, I think. Start at the side somewhere. I'm going to use my brain for a change. And I am going to put, oh yeah, those pins on the floor. Oh my God, there's 3 pins on the floor. Okay, 3 pins on the floor, not good when you have bare feet. All right, I am going to use my noodle here, and I am going to take my strands along rather than use the thread cutter, the self-cutting thing, because, where's my bobbin thread gone? There it is. Sometimes it doesn't look very neat on the back when you start from the auto cut thread. Makes sense? So I'm going to hold these 2 strands off to the side so they're easy to snip neatly when I'm done. That is so much neater than starting where the thread cutter has been. It's a little creased, that denim, isn't it? I don't think I could get the creases out of that, and I don't know if I can risk ironing this webbing either. Pretty sure there's a synthetic content in it, so I'm not sure about that. Oh well. So now all that remains is to close up this gap. If I had thought ahead, I would have ironed my seam allowances down before turning it right side out. What I also like to do is just mark the beginning and end of the opening with a pin, because it's kind of hard to see when you're actually sewing. All done. Just got to push that in there and should fit perfectly. And it's finished. Well, my phone nearly died. Oh, I just got to the end of making that bag and it made a funny little noise and it was down to 5%. So it was just as well that I was at a good breaking point and I could plug it in and move things around a bit. So the finished bag that I just showed you the making of, it's a good size. It looks huge, but it's only like 1 inch bigger than the ones I normally make. So I'm happy with that. That came out well. The pocket on the front should be nice and useful. And guess what I forgot to do? Where did it go? Where did it go? I don't even know what I did with it. I made that key tether and I completely forgot to incorporate it when I put the handles in. I don't even know where it's gone. I probably pushed it onto the floor at some point and completely forgot it existed. What am I like? Never mind. It's not essential. It was just an extra little bonus thing that I've been adding to some of the bags lately. It's not essential. Oh. Anyway, it has a pocket, which is fun. So there's the front pocket. And then, yeah, the inside. I really like that fabric with the turquoise and the pink and purple. I do like it a lot. So that's one bag ready. The one I made first this week, I can't remember why or how I got inspired to make this, but you know those rag quilts where people put a couple of layers of fabric together, sometimes 3 or more layers of fabric together in squares and do a cross and then sew it together and snip and then wash and it all fluffs up and it's a rag quilt, right? I made a rag quilt bag. Look at that. So I had this orange plaid in the stash. I had all these denims, of course, in different shades. And I think I cut them 5 inches. Yeah, 5-inch squares, sewed them together. One of the things that's kind of tricky about this method is that you're having to go against the grain. You know how normally when you sew a seam, you're putting right sides together. In this one, you are putting the wrong side of the denim and the plaid together. And then when it comes to doing the seam, you have to make sure it's going to be on the outside, not the inside. And I know I got a couple of the denims the wrong way round. I'm pretty sure this is the back of one of the denims, and maybe that as well. So obviously when I was doing my squares, I confused myself, but I still think it's kind of fun. And for the handles, I just made them out of the plaid and then sewed them on here with that sort of cross hatch thing. Very sturdy. And then I threw it in the washer and dryer. Still see some threads hanging off this though. There should not be threads. There should only be frayed denim and plaid, not black threads. I can see I'm going to have to go around this and just check for black thread. So compared to that other bag I just made, it looks really small. So I'm not sure if they're going to like that. What I'll do when I contact the person who's the coordinator and one of the other bag makers for this charity, I will ask her if she thinks this is suitable. If not, I'll find somebody else who likes it instead. I won't be offended if she says no. It's not the standard kind of bag that I think they're looking for. But hey, it was fun to make. And of course, there's always a bit you miss, right? Always. So after I had finished, I had washed it and dried it, and all of the bits were looking nice and messy. And then I think it's right here, I had forgotten to snip this section here. Now I don't have proper rag snips, so all I used was these. And yeah, it wasn't very comfortable. They were complaining after a lot of snipping, and so was my wrist, but I made it in one session, so it was done. So that was bag number 1. You've seen bag number 3. Bag number 2 I am especially proud of because I think it's beautiful. I got the small box that I mentioned before of the smaller pieces of denim, and I grabbed a whole bunch of them out of there. I picked a whole ton of contrasting shades of denim, and I included some seams in this, and I just pieced strips and then sewed the strips together. So I'll show you the back first. This is another huge one. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different denims in there. So I pieced a whole bunch across and then again and again, and then sewed the 3 strips together. There's a seam in here, a seam in here. I kind of like that you can see that it used to be jeans. And then on the front, I did the similar thing, but I've also appliqued butterflies on it. This is a quilt cotton, and I cut a couple of the butterflies out of it. And I used heat and bond to fuse them on, and then satin stitched around or zigzag stitched around. And then because I didn't want to faff about trying to applique the antennae, because that would have been really fiddly, I added little bead antennae instead. Let me see how close we can get to that. So you'll see that there's pink beads and a little gold bead at the very end. And I sewed them on just with thread. And then this one's got blue beads with a little silver bead on the end. And then I did remember to do the key tether for that one out of the butterfly fabric before I attached the webbing handles. So I could totally keep this for myself. I'm not going to, but I could. I have so many bags, it's silly, so I don't really need another tote bag. But yeah. Oh, and this one has the lining, that's the same as the one I just made. The pinks and purples and turquoises. And I love the way that the butterflies that I cut out of the quilt cotton kind of coordinate with the lining. So I love this bag a lot. And I love that it really didn't cost me anything. This was the last of my Fabricland webbing. This is the webbing I do really love. It's a polyester one. It's a bit thicker than that cotton poly one from Amazon, but it's so much more expensive. And I now have barely any of it left. So obviously the D-ring, swivel ring. The swivel hook I did pay for. The thread I paid for. But the fabric and denim and butterflies, mostly free. So yeah, just a few pennies for beads and a swivel hook and some webbing. So that was that on the denim front. And then one more thing. Does she ever stop talking? I hear you ask. Nearly there. I had 2 of these Hello Kitty quilt panels, and I think I may have cut the other one up. Can't remember what I used it for, but I have this one, and it was a big Hello Kitty face with Hello Kitty and some other stuff on the panel. So I just cut it as best I could to make as big a tote as I could out of it. So there's Hello Kitty's face, and on the back it's got the writing. And then I used the border that was around the panel for the handles. So fun. Made a decent sized tote, and I did French seams for that so that the seam allowances are all hidden away. And yeah, I think that one's just going to stay here with me. Can't imagine anyone else that I know wanting it, but I definitely will use that. What I might do is, because it's just cotton with no lining, I might just roll it up and put it in my everyday bag that I take out with me as an emergency shopping bag. Which reminds me, I didn't incorporate any sort of way of holding it closed, but maybe I will see if I have some of the scraps left, and I could make just a little strip in the same way as I made these handles, and then put a cam snap on each end so that I can wrap it around and snap it, and it'll just hold it all together when I'm not using it. There's a good idea, Nicola. I guess that's the next job. I think that's it for today. That was a lot of sewing and a lot of fun. Now that I have 6 totes ready to dress for success, I'm going to get in touch with the lady who I dealt with last time, see if she'd like to take them all off my hands, and think about what's next. I'm itching to do some more paper crafts, actually. I follow some interesting people on YouTube and Instagram, and I really, really want to do more paper crafts. So I don't know, maybe this coming week will be less sewing, more paper crafts. But who knows? Maybe I will get pulled in a completely different direction from that idea. So no promises. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe and all that fun stuff, just to let people know that I'm here. I am up to 1,100 subscribers, which compared to some is not very many, but to me is an amazing number. So thank you if you are subscribed. It really helps let YouTube know that people want to see what I'm putting out. So I'll see you again, I'm sure, next week with something else that's fun. Bye for now.